So, thank you everyone for joining us for our South of Market history program. We are San Francisco Heritage. My name is Kerri Young. I'm the Programs and Communications Director, and I'm here with Woody LaBounty, our President and CEO. And so, really quickly, a little bit about us. We are a nonprofit membership organization with a mission to preserve and enhance San Francisco's unique architectural and cultural identities. I like to say identities. And we've been around for a little over 50 years, and our work includes educational programming. We steward two historic properties in San Francisco, and we also advocate for historic resources across the city. And so if you haven't heard of us before, if you heard about this program from someone else, we encourage you to visit our website at sfheritage.org to find out more about our work, find out more about future programs coming up. So we want to thank you for being here today.
We're flying out tonight. So,
And so this program, why are we here today? Why are we covering the South of Market? So this program is part of our Heritage in the Neighborhoods program that that Woody and I created a few years ago to really bring a citywide focus and also SF Heritage resources to really unsung neighborhoods in San Francisco. And yeah, it's Woody.
yeah.
What more can you tell us about this program?
Yeah, we kind of say unsung, and you think, well, South of Market's pretty well known. But I
Mhm.
think what we try to do with this program is so often in sort of preservation work, we are reactive. There's something in danger, we have to save it, or we have to help speak up for it. And often that happens in downtown areas, big, buildings with wealth behind them or high visibility. But often, there's smaller places or communities or businesses in neighborhoods and places that just don't get in the press as much. And we wanted to be proactive about going to those places. And with this South, we'll talk more about it in this show, but the South of Market, you hear a lot about it in many different ways, but there's so many stories and so much history there that we thought we'd try to get below that top level of what you may have heard about South of Market and share some of its history and some of the opportunities for our work in that neighborhood.
Yes, exactly. And so many of you may be familiar with the South of Market, also Soma, but you can see here how big of an area it is. And so I think we just want to establish Soma's boundaries for the purpose of our
Yeah.
program. So what streets are we talking
Well,
about here?
south of Market is the area south of Market Street, which is the diagonal main street of San Francisco. Um, it's a big area in the sense that it could cover everything from the waterfront to the Mission District. We mostly are focused on the area from like First Street, Main Street, maybe over to where the streets start turning to the Mission. So let's say Dubose or 11th, 12th Street, that area
Mhm.
out there. And then once you get down to Mission Bay and the Channel and where McCovey Cove is, then we're just kind of like cutting that out. We kind of feel like that's its own neighborhood now, Mission Bay. So
Mhm.
it's still a giant, giant area of town that we're going to try to hit in 40 minutes.
Right. And we're a nonprofit focused on preserving and highlighting historic resources in San Francisco. So that's really going to be our focus in this program, in this show tonight, and just for background about, why we're highlighting certain things over others, because there is so much
Yeah,
in the South of Market.
we're just going to do a little bit. So,
Yeah, exactly. And quickly before we move on, Woody, I wanted to highlight a quote that you actually brought highlighted in one of your early articles about the South of Market, which is something that SF Heritage back in 1985 said about the Soma neighborhood. They even then, in the 80s, they were sort of like, this is a neighborhood a little hard to define. And they said that, quote, it has been likened to San Francisco's back stairs, its basement, its service porch, its backyard. If downtown San Francisco is the city's Manhattan, south of Market is its Brooklyn or its Bronx. Do you think that's fair today?
You
Certainly
know,
today.
it's hard to typify anything, but I think the what they're trying to get across is maybe downtown is where all the action is, but south of Market is where all the work is happening. And that has been true pretty much over its entire history. It's been the place where there have been factories, blue collar industries, warehouses. And so you might have the glamorous sort of firms and businesses and banks north of Market, and the fashionable residence areas and shopping areas, where south of Market, you're going to have the warehouses, the factories, the foundries. And in some ways, that's still kind of true today, but work is different today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
because
just
that
thought it was
road is
fun to
split.
sort of look back on what our own organization said about some of
Yeah.
the 80s.
Yeah. So going back to the gold rush, let's kind of start there real quick. And this picture is actually taken 20 years after the gold rush, but it gives you a sense of what south of Market was for early San Francisco. It was hilly, it had sand dunes, it had streams running through it and sort of water features, you might say, little swampy areas, estuaries. But even from the beginning, it was basically the place where factories, foundries, and industry found its home pretty quick. So this picture, you have Spear Street on the right, Main Street on the left, and Folsom Street cutting cutting through the middle. And if you look to the right, you can still see the ships in the harbor there. Over time, this large cove of water was filled in, and the city kept expanding to the east on made land. But if you see here, there's little factories, there's little warehouses, barns, and residences. And Kerri, we can kind of highlight a couple of things here. In the
Oh, yeah.
distance, in the center would be Telegraph Hill. And on
Hmm.
the left, you see that tall tower. That was the Selby Shot Tower, which was 200 feet tall, and where they basically dropped molten iron from different heights into water. And as the iron drops would fall, they would form nice round shot for use in all sorts of things. And it cooled off when it hit the water. So it was a big landmark in early South of Market history. And then, we say industry, we say factories and warehouses, but south of the slot, and that nickname came from the idea of the cable car lines that used to run on Market Street, which, has a slot where the cable goes in. So they called the area south of the slot. It was definitely also a residential neighborhood. So
Hmm.
in this picture, around 1880 or so, you see the Palace Hotel. It just dominates this scene. And in
It's
the distance,
huge.
you see Nob Hill on the right and
Yeah.
churches. But Kerri, look what's in the foreground of this shot of South of Market. Just tons of houses, tenements, flats, apartments, just filling every alley and every possible inch of space on those large South of Market blocks.
Right. I think you could start to tell from this photograph just how dense it was south of Market before the earthquake. And this Sanborn map in from the 1870s gives you even more of a sense of just how dense the streets and alleys of the South of Market really was. And I wanted to thank historian Judy Leff for sharing this with us in her research of Wyatt Earp and Josephine Earp, his the famous lawman's life partner, who actually was born and grew up in these, lived and worked in these alleys in the
Yes.
south of the slot. And
Yeah.
wow,
And
just
all yellow basically is wood frame buildings. So that will come up later. This whole place is made of wood. And most of these folks are the working class. They're the people working in the factories and foundries, hotels, railroads. I have relatives that grew up down there too. And he was a teamster and he basically drove wagons, paint around town. So this was the working neighborhood of San Francisco. And the population before the earthquake got as high as 60,000 people south of Market. So it was a very dense and very residential neighborhood as well as an industrial one.
wow, 60,000 people.
Yeah, the city was like 300 and something thousand at the earthquake.
Right.
So it's a lot of people.
Right. Well, and so it also, south of the slot, it wasn't just, only for, the working class folks. It was also following the gold rush. There was also an affluent enclave on the Rincon Hill side of the neighborhood. And so, yeah, just in the 1850s, we had the affluent residential enclave of South Park that was created. And then shortly after, more, affluent residents started moving in and around Rincon Hill, the lowest of San Francisco's hills. But they built a sheltered enclave with these really grand mansions, set back from the street with lovely gardens in the front. And, we had people like William T. Sherman and Governor Leland Stanford have homes here.
Yeah.
And so yeah, this was a really kind of sheltered place. And here on the left, you can see in this photo from 1865 is a view down Second Street towards
Mhm.
Market Street, and you can sort of see like these nice homes, these nice gardens. But really, this wasn't going to last very
Yeah.
long.
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, on the right here, you see William Lent. He was a capitalist. This is his house at 555 Harrison Street. And Rincon Hill, you don't really see it today because it's where the Bay Bridge, Anchorage, and all the freeway kind of hits. There's a little bit of incline. You'll see it parts. But it didn't last too long. It was maybe 20 years. The weather was great, but you did have a lot of smokestacks just down the hill. And something changed pretty big in the late 1860s to make this a less desirable neighborhood for the wealthy and the powerful.
That's right. And that is because of the Second Street cut, which cut a gigantic, like a cut through Rincon Hill.
Yeah.
And essentially this extensive grading that was really spearheaded by this one man who named John Middleton, who was just a real estate developer, and he just really, really wanted to create this business street that would make it, in his eyes, easier to bring goods from the Pacific Mill wharves on the other side of Rincon Hill into the downtown area. And he even, ran for state assembly and used his influence once he won to get the Second Street cut done.
Yeah.
So that is political influence. But yeah, it didn't really. What was the outcome of the Second Street cut, Woody? Did that
Well,
really work?
yeah, you have houses that are teetering. It really kind of made the neighborhood undesirable. You can see on the right what it looked like after you have that bridge for a little while over Second Street. Actually, that bridge was there a long time. But think of it this way, there was a steamboat point, there were goods on the south side of this hill, and wharves. And if you create a nice flat roadway to downtown, then all that real estate over there becomes very valuable and you can spark a lot of industry. So it became immediately less fashionable, though it took years for many of these folks to move out, and it changed the character of the neighborhood.
That's right.
Yeah,
And a lot of these wealthy folks moved up to Nob Hill.
right.
Right.
And the cable cars got invented, which made it accessible, and so Nob Hill became the place for the super rich and powerful.
That's right.
So, real quick, when you talk of south of Market before the earthquake, there's sort of a narrative that was very much established after the earthquake of how much it was an Irish neighborhood. And it was always a very diverse and um, heterogeneous neighborhood. I mean, there were Scandinavians and Finns, African Americans, Chinese, and lots of Germans south of Market. But you get around the late 1860s, there becomes a big influx of Irish American workers and families south of Market. So here on the right, you have the Irish American Benevolent Association Hall, and that was put on Howard Street between 4th and 5th, I believe it is. And more than 30 Irish American societies use this hall. That's how sort of dense and populous Irish culture was south of Market in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. On the left here, these are showing different National Guard uniforms of different militias in San Francisco in the 1870s, and two of them are Irish militias themselves. There was the Shields Guard and the McMahon Guard and the Emmett Guard. So Irish, and there was a Hibernian Hall, lots of Irish businesses. It would definitely cast a characteristic of south of Market, south of the Slot as an Irish neighborhood
Mhm.
before the earthquake in the late 19th century.
And so basically, there is a really prominent legacy and remnant that we could see today
Yeah,
of this Irish population. Is that right?
there's one left. I mean, there's this is the main one, and it's St. Patrick's Church, which is on Mission Street between Third and Fourth. And this was built, they had a smaller one on Market Street when this church was built in the early 1870s, about 1870 actually. It was giant. I mean, you can kind of see it on the left here. Had a 200-foot steeple. At its height, there were 30,000 parishioners to St. Patrick's. It was definitely associated. It was the Irish National Church, essentially, for San Francisco. Um, and you see it on the right. And what changed is they said, when they built it, they had just had the 1868 earthquake in San Francisco. So when they built it, they said, don't worry, we're going to put everything we can into this. It's going to be earthquake proof. After the 1906 earthquake, and pretty much most of it fell down. So they immediately rebuilt it. And you can see it on the right today. They didn't put the steeple on, but essentially it's the same design. And it was rededicated June 3rd, 1907. It is San Francisco landmark number 4, one of our earliest
Or
landmarks, and it definitely is still part of that Irish culture, even though it's not really an Irish church anymore. But inside you have stained glass with the patron saints of all the counties in Ireland, Connemara marble. It's definitely the biggest legacy from the Irish American culture that used to be south of Market.
Mhm. That's great. So, the next time you're around, go inside,
Oh
see
yeah,
it.
definitely go in. Always go
Definitely
into
go
a cool
inside.
place if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is a shame that they lost the steeple, but I get it.
it was big.
So, as you were saying, the south of the slot was really it came to be known as an Irish neighborhood, but there were other, communities very much living there at the time. You said Germans and
Lots.
also, yeah, and also the Chinese population as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and this is it was a very seminal spot south of Market. I don't know if you want to talk about it, Kerry, but at 349 Third Street
Hmm.
was a Chinese laundry that was run by a man named Li Yik, and so much anti-Chinese prejudice going on in the 1880s. There was an ordinance passed in San Francisco that was trying to get rid of Chinese laundries, and so essentially the city said, well, we're going to give permits for laundry use. We want to stop fires from happening. So you have to get a special permit. And there were more than 200 Chinese run laundries. And the
Hmm.
city gave an operating permit to one of the 200 Chinese laundries. Of all the white owned laundries, it gave permits to everybody but one.
Hmm.
So Lee Yick and another laundryman, Wo Lee, they filed suit, and it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1886, where it was basically a test of the 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment gave equal protection and due process
Mhm.
to everybody, but
To all
whether,
to
yeah,
all persons, quote, without regard to any differences of race, color, or of nationality. So this was an extremely important US civil rights case, a really important piece of our nation's civil rights history. And
yep.
it started right here in the South of Market.
And what's
And
there today, Carrie?
it's a parking lot currently, and there's no indication whatsoever that extremely important history was made here. And so we'll get to that a little later. But
Yeah, we want to see if we can address that. But just to give you an idea, it's not all Irish Americans. There are many different people, and some of them did some amazing things that still resonate today.
Right.
So, so
Whoa, everyone might recognize this building.
will they? It's kind of under construction here, but yes, I mean, if you talk about significant buildings south of Market, I mean, along Market Street, of course, there's the Palace Hotel and other buildings, but this has to be maybe second most important building, significant historical building in San Francisco. Maybe Mission Dolores is ahead of it, but the U.S. Mint building on Fifth Street between Market and Mission, it opened in 1874. It's monumental. It's an engineering feat. It's basically survived the 1906 earthquake. It has so much to do with our history in the sense that it not only had most of the gold supply from the gold rush held there, and was a big part of our economy in the 1870s and 80s, but it after the 1906 earthquake and fire, because it survived, it basically allowed the city to be rebuilt. We had the financial ability to do that because we didn't lose everything inside. So, and this building is so important, but yet it is almost always endangered.
Mm,
They tried to tear it down in the 50s and put an office tower in. It's been on the National Register for Historic Places, 11 most endangered properties in the United States, twice.
twice, twice.
And the city, we've had museum, thoughts, lots of different, the Smithsonian maybe was going to be there. Anyway, they still haven't quite come up with a future for the Mint, unfortunately. So it's definitely something that is an ongoing preservation need and important thing that has to happen
That's
that we
right. I
haven't
think
solved
some
it.
people on this call have been involved with, the attempt to, reinterpret, reopen this for the public. And I know we all want to see that. And
Yeah,
so,
it's great inside.
yeah. Speaking of earthquake,
Yeah. So the south of Market, this is the seminal moment, not for the city, but I mean, not only for the city, but south of Market basically was eradicated and started over because of the 1906 earthquake. Almost every building either got toppled, as you see here on Dory Street, because it was built on landfill and the earthquake shook it up, or the fires that followed the earthquake burned it. It was all wood frame mostly. So after 1906, what does south of Market look like? Well, very few buildings survive. We're going to see one here, I think, in this
we're
next
gonna
slide.
see, and first, and yeah, this is before the fires happened, as
Yes,
Woody was
they're on their
saying.
way. They're on their
And
way.
this is just a view of the Mint, as Woody was saying, very famously survived the earthquake and fire. It had like a third of the nation's gold reserves, right?
Mhm.
So the the heroic effort on behalf of the employees to save the building, save the gold inside, also not only save the building, but kind of save the economy from
Exactly. It did.
collapse as
Yeah.
well. So
And
yeah,
you can see like it's approaching, and the employees, it had its own water supply that it basically used also. And they stood on the roof and just basically put out fires for an entire day and a half, maybe 2 days. So it was an amazing thing. So just for that, the Mint should be preserved and open to the public. It's just a significant building. But if you look at the rest of South of Market, we had the federal building survive, a few others, but this is what mostly South of
right.
Market looked like after the earthquake and fires. In the center distance, you see the ruins of City Hall, that dome in the middle. Just to the right, on the other side of that pillar, you see the Fairmont Hotel in the very
Mhm.
far distance, which was gutted. And on the far right there, you see the dome of the Call building,
What
which is
this is
still.
doing.
So
So what's South of Market going to look like after the earthquake and fire, Kerri? Are we just going to start fresh, have a whole new approach? What happens in South of Market after the earthquake?
yeah, a little bit. Well, what can you tell us about this building?
Well, industry does return. This was the Jackson Brewing Company building. It was under construction. It was pretty much built before the earthquake, and then the owners essentially finished it after the earthquake. So you have industry, you have breweries, you have foundries, you have warehouses, small factories, light industry returns. What doesn't return so much are those 60,000 people that live
Right.
there. You get burned out by a big disaster, you start looking at other parts of town, and they don't come back because it is an industrial space, and they basically decide, okay, we're going to keep this as the sort of blue collar working space of the city, but it kind of loses a lot of its residential feel.
Right. So, but what we do have are many, many residential hotels that start to
Mhm.
be built after the earthquake to house and support this new population, tons and tons of workers, seasonal workers, itinerant workers, just people working in nearby warehouses, factories, on the docks. And
Right.
so many of these, single room occupancy hotels are going up all around the South of Market.
Yeah, they're mostly for the workers that are coming through and less about the families and people staying forever. But so many of these were built and some of them are great. What is this one on the right I'm looking at here? The Hotel Carnot. What is that? Or is it
That
Carnot?
is, you'll, many of you might recognize, is today the Hotel Utah, 4th and Bryant, and it is still there today. And many of you probably have seen it from the freeway when you're about to get onto the Bay Bridge. I know
That's true.
I always waved, take a look. It's just such a fantastic embodiment and also remnant of this rebuilding of the
Mhm.
South of Market. And the building serves the same purpose today as it did, when it was built, pretty much with residences on the upper floors and ground floor storefronts, many of which have been saloons. And so this is the building in 1923. Around by 1945, the hotel was renamed to the Hotel Utah,
Mhm.
as it is known today. But
There it is.
and so, from the 30s to, the 70s, this was really on the ground floor. It became the Trans Bay. It was the Trans Bay Cafe and then the Al's Trans Bay in reference to the nearby Bay Bridge that
Uh-huh.
was recently built and the
Yeah.
on-ramp that was very close by. And this was a really popular hangout. Joe DiMaggio was in like a duck hunting club situation that brought him to Al's Trans Bay Tavern. And but by the late 1970s, the it became the Hotel Utah Saloon,
Yeah.
and it became the entertainment venue that we know it as today.
Yeah.
The owner added this awesome little stage for local live music, local bands to play. It has the longest running open mic in the
Mhm.
city still.
Yep.
And so we very much encourage you to visit, catch a performance. And it really just kind of embodies this sense of history when you're inside. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And I will say, I performed at the Hotel Utah. It's a great little space. They have a little
yeah,
balcony. You feel like you're in an old West saloon back there. But I just want you to, if those of you who have been to the Hotel Utah, keep that in your mind as we go forward because that it's a landmark, but it definitely is of a type. It's a residence hotel with a restaurant slash bar on the ground floor. So if you're in an SRO living upstairs, you're retired or you're a longshoreman or you work as a pressman at one of the newspapers, you got to eat, you got to drink, you go downstairs. So it had that service on the ground floor. And later, the city really tries to portray South of Market and these hotels as Skid Row, as these terrible places where alcoholics are living and costing the city money. And I'm sure there definitely was some of that. But a lot of them were more like what you imagine the Hotel Utah like today. They were little communities of themselves. They were well run, well kept, and they did not want to be displaced. So we'll talk more about that as we go forward.
right. And I also just want to give a shout out to the Hotel Utah's food, which is exceptional. It's actually extremely good.
Okay,
So
good to
they
know.
they enter their chili into like chili cook-offs. So I highly recommend.
Sounds
It's
good.
it's better than you think it's going to be.
No,
So
I think it's going to be great. So I don't know if it'll reach
okay, well.
far.
And
So here's,
so,
yeah.
this is another example of a residential building that was built, right?
Yeah, and again, when we talk about the Skid Row, people, a lot of it had to do with conditions. Some landlords did not keep up their hotels, but look how beautiful the Orlando Hotel was, built just after the earthquake with the dome and the details. And even today, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
It's still got the dome. Rarely does the dome hang on, but it's got a recent paint job. And this is Sixth Street. This is if we have a Skid Row today, it's Sixth Street probably.
Hmm.
But yeah, you still have these hotels that house people that need housing. And it's the same back then as it is today. And some of the buildings are just like amazing. And we lost a whole lot of them in redevelopment.
Right.
So this is a good one, Carrie. I like this shot because on the right you got the Castle Hotel, and it has a sign, rooms, 35 cents a night. And I think you
Mm.
can stay a whole week for like $2 and a something.
Including
But
housekeeping, it looks like.
yeah, free housekeeping. They'll probably change your towels. But if you look at the scene on Folsom Street, and you're like, oh yeah, they got industry, you got a little coppersmith and a boiler shop, and you got a blacksmith, and you got the residential hotel all right there on one block face. But then if we looked at it today, what does it look like, Carrie?
Whoa, what's going on?
Well, I think what's ironic is the blacksmith Clockers is still there. That building, it still hangs in there in the middle of that block. And the buildings on either side of it are actually probably shorter than the ones that were there in 1919. But the whole background, the backdrop, and if you go walk around that area, it's all gleaming towers all around you, blue glass and steel and glimmering, shiny, large towers. But little bits of that sort of post-quake industry and light industry still, there's little bits of it still around, and this is one of them, the Great Blacksmith Shop.
And that's really incredible. And so it's pieces of the rebuilding of the South of Market, this history, it's still there today. So the
Yeah,
next time you're walking around, can
it's good to
further.
preserve them because it tells that story as the city changes. So, awesome.
Ooh, okay.
So, Third Street after the earthquake became very much a community of new immigrants, mostly to the United States from Greece. And it got a nickname in later years of Greek Town. Um, a lot of Greeks came to the United States for, like most immigrants, come for work. A lot of them came to work on the railroads. And through that, a lot of them ended up on the West Coast. Um, Third Street, especially around Folsom, Howard, just sprouted Greek cafes, hotels. There were two or three newspapers in Greek newspapers. The Greek consulate was there for a while. There were businessmen. Some of them were very successful and had large sort of candy factories. Confectionery was a big thing. But there were tons who had shoe shine businesses, small cafes, and coffee houses. So in this picture, you see the Smyrna Cafe, Constantinople Cafe, the
Hmm.
Athens restaurant. This was all part of Greek town, which really was flowering in the 1910s and 1920s. And it's something that I think people don't really know about south of Market today. And there's not much that kind of calls back to that.
Hmm. But there are a few things. Well, like the Irish community, there is also a church, right? That remains.
That's right, Holy Trinity. It was the first Greek Orthodox church or Greek parish, I guess, in the West Coast when it was built. And at first, it was this little building, 1903, 1904, on 7th Street. And then they built their permanent Holy Trinity Church, or so they thought, which is still there at 3457 7th Street today. Now, Holy Trinity eventually moves and it's out on Brotherhood Way. It goes out there in the 1960s, a beautiful church out there on Brotherhood Way on the west side of town. And now this is St. Michael's Ukrainian Orthodox Church. But again, like St. Patrick's calls back to the Irish American community that was there, this church, which has that great dome and is just very architecturally um, intact, definitely calls back to Greek town. And I don't think it's a city landmark right now. And I do think it would be a great candidate to remember Greek town and to make note of the Holy Trinity Church that used to be there.
Hmm. absolutely. And so we've covered the Greek community after the earthquake. We've covered itinerant, seasonal workers
Uh-huh.
in the South of Market. But there's some, there's the kind of mysterious other community also in the South of Market that we think we should mention, and that is the newspaper man. uh, because we have the SF Chronicle in their neo-Gothic building on Fifth and Mission. We have the Examiner at Third and Market.
Mhm.
And so, naturally, all of these pressmen, these journalists, they need some places to hang out. And so a crop of what became known as newspaper bars really sprung up in the South of Market, in the 20th century. And there's just a couple that we've highlighted this month, including the M&M on the top left, which was originally more next to the Chronicle building, but then it
Yeah.
moved further down the block, and now it's home to the Chieftain.
Mhm.
All right.
That's Fifth and Howard, right? Is that
Fifth
right?
and Howard,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We have Breen's here in the center, which is near Third and Mission.
Yeah, it's on
And
Annie. It was on Annie right in the corner. That.
Annie, yeah, exactly. And this was more of a kind of a Hofbrau cafeteria style, no nonsense place. You kind of like Tommy's Joint. You get like a roast
Yeah.
beef sandwich, some
Steam
steamed
trays,
trays.
guys in bow ties, slicing you off a big hunk of meat. So,
Exactly. We also had Hano's in the alley, which was right behind the Chronicle building. I believe it was Mary Street.
mhm,
And
that's right.
that was that sub-chronicle place, it was right next to their building. Carl Nolte said, he told me that people sort of looked weird at Examiner people if they walked in. It was,
It was definitely a Chronicle bar. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I guess there was sort of like turf situation
Turf wars.
happening. But I would like to think that all were welcome. But I
Yeah.
do want to read just some quickly because when Hanos was their building was demolished in the 1970s, ironically by the Chronicle. This is how the journalist Stanton Delaplane wrote in a sort of like eulogy to Hanos that I think really sums up what these bars meant to these newspapermen. And it was, this is how we learned journalism in those happy, underpaid days at Hannah's Happy Saloon. I really shouldn't call it a saloon. It was a school of journalism. Farewell to arms.
Yeah,
And
that was back to be a journalist. You had to drink a lot, I think. But I do think, you said something, Kerri, in the beginning. You said like, oh, under-recognized or unknown. I think these were all very well known because they were all writers who were
right.
going there drinking and
They
writing
were
about.
all writers who like wrote extensively about them. They
Yes,
wrote a lot about going there. I
that's
feel
where they
like
were working. So they were like, let's see, what can I write about today? Well, I am sitting here at the newsroom at 4th Street. I might as well write about that. Yeah.
yeah. So these were the living rooms
Yeah.
of these newspaper men,
I
in
got a
the
quick story. I got a quick story.
okay.
I know we didn't rehearse this. I'm just telling you. I got a quick story. I remember this story. I think it was from the M&M, where there was some guy who was just causing trouble, and they're like, "Get out of here! You've had enough. Time to go home." And the guy's like, "I don't have any money. Can you give me money for a cab?" And so the owner gives him $3 for a cab, and he leaves. And he's like, "Whew, that was the best $3 I ever spent." And then about an hour later, the guy comes back in. And he said, "What happened? I sent you home." And he said, "Yeah, but my wife gave me $3 to come back." So,
I think I
all
saw
right. This was our fun Friday post. So, we kind of got a little
read
out,
more about it on
yeah, a little off the history track there. But
yeah.
let's talk about a community that definitely was there and is still there today. And that is the Filipino community with changing federal laws on immigration. A lot of Filipino workers and families moved to San Francisco, especially in the 1960s after World War II, and the 60s and 70s, especially. And south of Market, like it was a landing place for the Irish in the 19th century and the Greeks in the 1900s. That became the landing place for so many Filipinos first coming to the United States in the mid 20th century. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, but I think the legacy of it today, the community is still there, and we're going to talk more about that. But there, when you look at like what are the places that talk about a community, part of it is naming things after the community. And Columbia
Hmm.
Square, which was one of the only parks in South of Market, has been renamed Vicky Manalo Draves Park
Hmm.
to for the first Filipino or Filipina who to ever compete in the Olympics. Is that
Hmm.
right, Kerri? I think that's true.
That's right. And she won two gold medals in the 1948 Olympics.
Yeah, amazing. What an amazing athlete. So,
And she grew up in Soma as well.
right.
So,
So all of that is part of it. We often name things after people, but they're often people who are famous, and she definitely was, but also people who are often in government or ran for office. It's always amazing. And I think the right thing to do is when you name it for somebody who grew up in a neighborhood and represents a community that's there. So sometimes we don't have the building, but we have the people. And I think that is a very valid sort of way to remember a community.
yeah, absolutely. And her park today is next to Bessie Carmichael School, which for a very long time was home to the Filipino Education Center,
Right.
also created in the 1970s to support newly arriving Filipino immigrants and their children, just to be able to get set up and established in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so that, these important community services started to form and become established community organizations, for example, to serve a really important need. But as you said, there is also um, a place that really tells the story of the Filipino community in the
Yeah.
South Market.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing we always try to make a point of. Is landmarks aren't always just about architecture. And this is a building. It's a very nice building, of course, on Mission Street. But what makes this a landmark, what makes this an important place is what happened inside and the people that use that building. And so this is the site of the Mint Mall and Hall at 953, 957 Mission Street. And Kerri, maybe you can tell us what happened there, and also what is the new big news about it?
Yeah, and so this was originally built in 1916 as a residential hotel, but it was really starting in the late 1980s, early 1990s, that it became a central hub for the Filipino community in San Francisco. The affordable upper floors were where many Filipino families first moved when they
Mhm.
arrived in the city, and they in turn would then support the retail businesses on the ground floor, which was called the Mint Mall.
Yeah,
And the these were more than just retail businesses. They were really community spaces. For example, we had Archipelago Books in the Mint Mall, as well as JT Restaurant, which is still there today. But, families would go to the owners of these businesses. They will go to Tess and just ask about, where can I find a good lawyer, or like, where can I find this resource to just help me navigate the city. And so these businesses really provided that space. They provided, direction for just getting set up in the city, much like the Filipino Education Center. And and yeah, and so very excitingly, this month, the Mint Mall and Hall was named San Francisco's newest city landmark.
hmm
And it was thanks to really SOMCAN and the Soma Filipinas Cultural District that spearheaded this effort. But I did want to say that, back in the early 2000s, community organizers formed the Save the Mint Mall organizing committee in order to fight eviction notices that were served to the nonprofits and the businesses in the Mint Mall. And their successful efforts to prevent displacement of these community members was, it really sparked renewed Filipino activism in San
yeah,
Francisco, and it really led to the creation of the Soma Filipinas Cultural District, which
yeah.
was one of the very first cultural districts established in San Francisco.
Mhm.
And so that, this space really embodies this legacy of activism going back to, saving the International Hotel, right, on Kearney Street in Manila town
Right.
and through to this effort to save the Mint Mall and Hall. And so now it's now a city landmark. It embodies this really important history in the Filipino community. And
Yep.
so, yeah.
So real quick, around the same time that all the Filipino community was building in South of Market, there were big changes coming. And you won't be surprised, a lot of you who know San Francisco history, that meant redevelopment. After World War II, urban renewal and redevelopment were all about trying to change big swaths of American cities, mostly to make them more economically viable for the city. So basically, if a neighborhood was costing the city money, it wanted to change it around so that the property taxes and the amenities of that would benefit the city. It wasn't about the people who were living in those neighborhoods, who were usually kicked out, displaced, businesses lost. So there's a long, long list of redevelopment projects throughout the nation that were very troubling and that we're still sort of dealing with today. South of Market, the idea was Yerba Buena Center. And that was the idea to build a new convention center, which would be great for business, office towers, a park, and maybe a sports arena. And this came out of some ideas from some businessmen in the 1950s. And by the 1960s, it really was part of the redevelopment plan, the redevelopment agency. So many of the residential hotels were torn down. Um, People fought back for sure. A lot of those folks in the residential hotels formed an organizing group that was tenants and owners in opposition, TOR, TOOR. And they actually won a lot of gains out of the redevelopment to get housing for the folks that were displaced. And they're still around today in some ways to help with affordable housing to be built in the neighborhood. But we did get some good things out of redevelopment. I think if you look, we have this cultural hub, SF MoMA, and this postmodern building that I think you're all familiar with.
Mhm.
And then we have the Martin Luther King Junior Memorial. So it's always a mixed bag, and redevelopment gave us this incredible space. It really did change a lot of things, but it was also the source of a lot of displacement, not
Mhm.
only for the Filipino community, but for a lot of those folks that were living in the residential hotels. Um, and it also sparked, because the 1990s were coming, a tech boom that definitely centered and in the south of Market and gave us a new name for the neighborhood.
And before we get there, we do want to mention
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about this. You're right. Before we get to tech, the
tech can
leather
wait. Tech
community, the
can always wait.
LGBTQ leather community was also in the mix here. It's 1960s, 1970s especially. And this is a nightlife bar community. And it's exemplified and really sort of embodied in the Eagle Bar, which is
Mhm.
on 12th. City landmark, legacy business, I believe. Uh,
Mhm.
and this community, it's basically so many people of the LGBTQ community. This is the people who really want to present in a masculine way after the World War II. And you think of like Marlon Brando and the motorcycle gangs and those leather jackets. And so there was that sort of subculture that was building up at that time. And it really, New York City and south of Market and San Francisco was really the epicenters for the leather community, which is still with us today. And I don't know if we can go to the next one, Kerri,
Mhm.
but not only was, oh, here we go. Now there's a cultural district, and we just went on this tour on Saturday,
Mhm.
which was amazing. We're standing in front of the Oasis here, which needs a new owner, I think, or somebody to take it over. Um,
Yep.
but they're still out there today and trying to keep this alive because all the displacement that was happening to everybody else also was putting pressure on the nightlife, on the hotels and the people who were living down there. Um, the leather community, we're writing about it this week. We have Drew Bourne, who's writing some great posts on it. So follow our posts the next couple of days. But the big thing I think that most people are aware of is the Folsom Street Fair, which somebody told me draws 500,000 people. It just blows my mind. Um, and that has gone to cities around the world
Hmm.
to celebrate leather culture and other subcultures of South of Market that we're tied into.
Sorry.
And I'm sorry I'm going fast, but I want to make sure we get everything in before our hour is up.
Hmm.
So as part of that, I said Yerba Buena Garden comes in. You have these different communities in there, and now tech, attracted by a lot of things, but especially by this sort of redevelopment and the aesthetic of having these open floor plan office spaces in these great, cool warehouses that were still down there. This becomes really the epicenter for a tech boom beginning in the 1990s.
Right. And this is when the neighborhood was essentially rebranded as Soma, right?
Yeah, what do you think of that, Carrie? Do you like Soma?
I've just, I've only known it as Soma. So,
I have a question about that. Should it be capital S, small o, capital M, small a, or all
I
caps?
mean, technically, but nah.
Oh, David Hurley says yes. I'm still on the fence about that, so we kind of go back and forth. But yeah,
Um,
go
yeah.
ahead. I was
Also shout out to our designer Ali Hernandez who are creating these like really awesome designs, and I love her Ethernet cable here to represent tech.
Are there still Ethernet cables? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion about tech in San Francisco, good and bad. And I think something that does get kind of missed is how historic buildings are adaptable. And so we had some of these great buildings south of Market. Tech moves in and they're looking for these buildings to reuse for office. And so here you have this beautiful Art Deco building that was meant for industry. It had like paint, had an HVAC company in it, and when it was built in 1930s and 40s. And now it's office space, and you have these beautiful sort of Art Deco detailing that can just immediately transform into a new use. And that's something I think people forget about historic buildings that are special is that are adaptable and they can
Hmm.
be used for different ways.
Absolutely. This is a beautiful building. And here we have another one.
So do you know the story of this building? It has this frieze on the top of like it looks like performers, and that's
Hmm.
because this building was originally built for scenery backdrops. So you'd hang them up really high. You needed like a 60-foot tall space to hang up these theater scenery backdrops. That's what it was originally for, the storage of that. Now it's lofts or it's like residential condos. So again, another building that could kind of change with the times. And now it's housing, even though before it used to hold giant opera curtains.
Yeah. And I love that they kept that detail
Yeah.
to harken back to this history. Well, I mean, these types of buildings are, I think, what people maybe think of when
Mhm.
they think of Soma, you know?
Yeah. And this is another moment of displacement. The city passed in 1988 a live work ordinance to get lofts for artists, and it sounded great. Immediately, developers went around it, and very few artists got to live in any of these live work uh, places that you got a lot of breaks from property taxes and fees. So suddenly you had, and these things were more expensive than a non-live workplace. So this was terrible, and the city eventually repealed this live work ordinance. But this is where you get another displacement round of artists. And I just want to say also, you get this style of building that is still with us today, this sort of new modernism, kind of have these bay windows and glass and kind of this big garage on the bottom that's all corrugated metal feeling. But some examples are pretty good. This is Stanley Seidowitz and
Mhm.
on Natoma Street, and he kind of sets the tone in the early 90s for this. Um, and I think the other thing is this is another one just off South Park by Levy and Architects. It's this kind of new modernism, postmodernism. And if you go into the alleys, there's a lot of architectural interest that does come around in the early 90s
Hmm.
from some of these designers. The craziest one is on Hallam Street. This is a row of postmodern buildings by Donald McDonald. I don't know it's like somebody got in Photoshop and started doing warp and just kind of played with the windows and the roof lines. Um, but I guess my question, Carrie, and the thing I've been thinking about is this all feels new and part of an era. And now I'm like, these are getting kind of old. I mean, this was more than 30 years ago. Are we going to
Yep.
start looking at some of these as historic resources in the future?
Yes. I
You think
mean,
so?
it's, I think so. I mean, it was very, it's similar to our, when we were spotlighting the resources along the Embarcadero, the Hyatt Regency, the Embarcadero Plaza. It's just like people might not think of these places as historic resources, but soon they will be,
We
and we need to
might.
consider,
Yeah.
might need to consider.
I like them. I love the alleys of Soma. They're just architectural styles that cover 100 years of time, and there's some interesting things like this.
Yeah, and just on the other end of this alley, are it's a leather bar, right, Woody? Or,
Yeah,
sites of significance to the leather community, as we saw on our walking tour this past weekend. So
yeah.
it's just, it's fun to walk around the alleys in Soma. It's like the best way to experience this different cultures, amalgamations of styles, and
It was
yeah.
nice to do it in daylight. I got to tell you that.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. Daylight.
I had many nights walking in those alleys, and I'm those are behind me. So, all right. So I guess the thing we're trying to say, we do these Heritage in the Neighborhoods months is like, what can we do, or what's the next step when we focus on a neighborhood? And there's some easy ones that we can kind of see. JT's is so great, and now at the Mint Mall and Hall, it's a landmark, especially it should be a legacy business and it does qualify. And we're talking to folks about how to get that in the legacy business registry, which does give some benefits to these long-standing community and cultural cornerstone businesses.
Right.
Um,
And these were, it's just to mention as well, like these are city-run programs, the Legacy Business Registry, the Cultural District Program, and these are really important preservation programs that
and
SF
tools.
Heritage really championed in the early days, really advocated for the city to adopt these programs that protected not only buildings, as Woody says, but the cultural communities, the people that inhabit these spaces and these buildings. And
Yeah.
so,
And Carrie, you just made a good point a few minutes ago is that you want to walk by those Donald McDonald triplex there, those postmodern buildings, and then you want to see the leather bar in the corner, right? You don't want this homogenous thing. You want to keep all the diversity, the places, the businesses, the people still together. And that's kind of the behind the legacy business and the cultural district idea.
mhm,
Definitely the Mint, as we talked about, is an ongoing preservation challenge that we need to solve as a city.
mhm,
And we're going to keep trying. I've been talking to we have a new mayor and trying to get that in front of him and understand that we have to have a plan for that. On the lower left, St. Michael's, is a Ukrainian Orthodox church, but it's a great building, and it would be great to recognize Greektown in some way south of Market. And it's like the best example of kind of embodying that Greektown. And then what we mentioned before is, you know, JT's is about people in business. The Mint is very much about the building. St. Michael's is about people and the building for sure, almost equal. And then there's just people and events and the Yickwo laundromat, the laundry, and what that meant for civil rights in the United States. There should
mhm.
be some way to commemorate that. I mean, we have a parking lot right now, but the building's gone. So how do we do that? And we're talking with some folks, whether it's a plaque, whether it's an interpretive program, whether it's an event. But there's some way we got to get that back out, especially right now. It feels like it's more relevant than ever. That's another way to kind of talk about a preservation project that comes out of this.
Right. And
We
these,
want to know what you think, right,
yeah,
Carrie?
exactly. These are a few projects that, we've thought of as the month has progressed, and but we want to hear from you as well. If you think there's a preservation opportunity that we should pay attention to, then yeah, just post in the chat, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. So also a note, I mentioned our designer, Ali Hernandez, who's done some great work for us. She created these really, really fun stickers, South of Market sticker pack. And so we're creating these right now, and we'll have these available for our, end of year appeal at the end, so just stay tuned if you want one
We'll
of
give
these
you an
special.
opportunity to get some of these real soon.
There's an opportunity to get these,
Yeah.
and we think they're really fun.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. And, this, what we talked about tonight is just such a fraction, as we said at the beginning, of the histories, the people, the communities in the South of Market. But we have been writing all about some of these places all month. And if you've missed those, then you can find them on our website. We've written numerous articles. We've had amazing guest posts, as Woody said, like, please check out this week the articles by Drew Bourne about the leather community, read more about the eagle and the stud, and all these other fun things that we didn't get the chance to cover tonight. If you want to learn about the Playland Carousel in your Botanic Gardens,
Oh yeah.
or like gold bars stacked on each other in the Museum of the Mint, those are things that you could read on our website.
Yeah, it was a lot to cover. I mean, we didn't talk about the Palace Hotel. There's a lot of bigger buildings and other things too, but we just tried to do what we could and try to tell some of the stories that maybe people don't know. So
Right.
thank you all for coming tonight. Is there
And
anything else we have to do?
well, I did, yeah, just to say that, we have found the best way to experience these neighborhoods is just to go out and spend time in the neighborhoods. Like, please read what we've written, but if you can go out, wander the Soma alleys in the daytime, but and just really get a chance to get to know this
Yeah.
neighborhood. And I will give a shout out to Shaping San Francisco that has, if you want an opportunity for a guided walking tour, they have a tour called Cutting Corners, Rincon Hill, South Park, and beyond, which is a tour that they offer every year. So,
Yeah.
Shaping San Francisco, they have tons of walking tours around the neighborhood and across the city. So, other like-minded organizations are city
Yeah.
guides, different groups that are giving you the opportunity to really walk around and explore
Yeah,
the
and the
city.
cultural district tour we took with the LGBTQ leather that Wild Honey gave us was awesome. And I hope there's more of those. So check out the cultural districts too. They often have events. The jeepney tour. There's just a lot to do. So
Right,
hopefully
exactly.
this gives
Yes,
you
the
some ideas.
Soma Filipinas has a new exhibit right now at the YBCA about the history of the Filipino community in the South of Market. It's a really significant milestone exhibition that they've collaborated on with multiple Filipino organizations. It's called Makibaka, A Living Legacy, and that's open until January. So please go out, check that out, and learn more about the Filipino community as well.